This is something that you and I've had this discussion. You knew this was coming, or everybody kind of had a feeling it was coming. The NCAA was getting pressured. Just from what we see today, is this about what you expected as far as what they okayed?
Yeah, honestly, I'm probably. I mean, again, what was released this morning, they're just recommendations. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of holes, but based on the recommendations, I'm actually pleasantly, somewhat surprised how, um, I guess, how liberal some of the recommendations were. I mean, for instance, recommending that players have agents involved and representation with all this stuff. That's pretty liberal, and I think I've talked to some congressmen and women who were a little were pleasantly surprised as well. That there was that the NCAA went this far. Of course, there are others who think these recommendations don't go far enough. But the thing is they're just recommendations, and they're probably going to change and be adjusted and tweaked over the next 2, 3, 4 months until, I think October 31st is the date to have actually language and legislation to be presented to vote in January. So we could see some changes.
Ross, obviously California passed the legislation that kind of kicked this can down the road a little bit and really forced the NCAA's hands. When you talk to people, do you sense that the NCAA is doing this kicking and streaming, or are there people there that realize this is what they've got to do and they're okay with it?
Oh, they are for sure kicking and screaming. There's
Okay.
no doubt about that. This is something that they have been forced into doing. I mean, you remember and this is just a few months ago, the NCAA set in, and I wrote about this a little bit earlier this week, but set in the office of a U.S. congressman and said, and this was about, I think this is March of last year, so 13 months ago this happened, sat in his office and said, no way, this is never happening, NIL is never happening, our amateurism model is going to be intact forever, and we're never going to bend on this issue. So because of what California did and other subsequent states, I mean, as many as 28, 30 states have NIL legislation going through their chambers. Um, they've been forced into this, and yeah, they're for sure kicking and screaming. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody is against this. I think you talked to several certain ads, and maybe even certain commissioners, in they're for it, or for at least a small part of instituting NIL. But at the top level, the NCAA leaders specifically, they were absolutely are being forced into this reluctantly.
Ross, when you always hear the argument, this is only going to affect a small group, only a handful of players would actually have a value, a worth. But as you point out on Twitter, promoting an athlete's business, well, that can include athletic lessons and a football camp. I can promise you that almost every school that plays football at a high level has a guy that could roll a football camp out there or say, hey, I'm going to give you quarterback lessons and can make a lot of money doing that. So I think it affects a lot of players when you talk about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, they're they've done some data and models to kind of project as far as the compensation athletes will make, and it is overall small. I mean, I think the top 2 or 3% are going to get a large portion of compensation when it comes to endorsement deals and ads, things like that. But everybody, especially a football player, is going to get probably some kind of compensation, some kind of deal. And like you said, the camps is a good example. They're going to get a cut of this. It's just it isn't going to be huge, but maybe it's enough, for these guys. They got cost of attendance a few years ago. Remember that started, and that's not a lot either, but it's enough to like pay for a lot of rent every month, and that's a start. That was a start, and now we're going to the next thing. But there are some guys like, I mean, think about it this year. Obviously, you have the virus pandemic, so it's a little different. But if you were able to do a camp this summer, like a returning player on LSU's team, like Jamar Chase. If he were to do the Jamar Chase receiving camp down in New Orleans, I'm thinking after a national championship season and the kind of season he had, that you're going to have a lot of he's going to be making a lot of money there, and he'll probably could rope in other players too. So for sure, there's going to be enough money to spread around. It's just significant money as far as 5-figure plus is probably only going to be reserved for some of the top players like Jamar or Joe Burrow or something like that.
Yeah, Ross, we were talking in the last segment. I don't think there's anybody anywhere who has a problem with Jamar Chase making some good money doing a summer camp after he wins the Biletnikoff Award at the national championship. That's just the world we live in. That's perfectly acceptable, I think, for everybody. When you talk to people that are against this, whether that's coaches, athletic directors, people on the NCAA side, what are the biggest one or two concerns that they voice that they think are serious issues?
Well, certainly the athletic directors, have spoken earlier today, and hopefully at some point tonight or tomorrow morning I have a story on SI.com. But I spoke today with the president of Lead One, which is an organization that deals with athletic directors and is kind of a community organization for athletic directors to share thoughts and ideas. And I was talking to him, the president of that organization. He was telling me about two big concerns that ADs have right now. One of them is the agent involvement. Yep. I mean, let's just get it. Let's just cut through the BS. Agents are shady and can be, and they can be sleazy and all that. And there's concern over having them involved, not just with college athletes, but with recruits and high school players. There is a real concern in that. There is also concern from ADs on monitoring all of this. We wrote a little bit about this on Monday, but this is a huge undertaking to monitor all of these players' NIL ventures. They have all these there's going to have to be compliance staff increases. There'll be 2 or 3 or 4 new compliance people hired at a lot of schools, especially places like LSU, big Power 5 school that are going to have a lot to deal with when it comes to keeping up with all these ventures. And ADs are concerned about that. They're concerned, honestly. They just to put it bluntly, they don't want to deal with it. I mean, they don't want their school to have to deal with it. They'd rather a third party deal with it. But right now, the recommendation is for the school to deal with it. So we'll see if that might change as these recommendations and as the discussion continues through August, September.
Ross Dellinger is our guest here on Hanging with Hester. Ross, I know you've got to run. I'll get you out of here with this one. Schools cannot have anything to do with putting these deals together, which good luck with that, first off. But so a coach cannot have a guy who owns a shop that says, hey, I want to have this quarterback on. They can't go through the coaches. Schools cannot be involved in any way, right?
Right. Just like now, coaches and schools can't pay recruits to sign with them. Right? Yeah. That doesn't happen at all right now, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So it's going to be
I felt your wink. I felt your wink through the radio.
Yeah, good. Because it's going to be the same. I mean, you're going to have schools involved and coaches involved with setting up endorsement deals. I mean, if they get away with it, they get away with it like now. If they don't, they'll get caught and they'll suffer some kind of insane infraction. But that's a whole nother, we talked about agents being involved, and we talked a little bit about ADs concerned about compliance offices, but that's a third concern for sure, is boosters in their role in this and how you have to keep them a little contained. And a big question is what's fair market value? If a law firm wants to pay if he wants to pay, say this coming year, wants to pay Jamar Chase, $100,000 to do one commercial, that's probably going to get flagged.
Yeah.
But who decides what fair market value is? You talk to people who are activists for athletes, and they'll say fair market is whatever the law firm wants to pay them. I mean, but that's not how the NCAA sees it, and they're gonna put almost a cap on some of that. So that's also a whole nother messy issue. All of it really is fairly complicated, and it's going to get a little messy here.
Ross, you're the man. Means a lot. You carved out a couple minutes for us here today on a very busy day. You can follow along with Ross on Twitter at Ross Dellinger. He is up to date on everything that is going on when it comes to NIL. Ross, appreciate it again, brother.
All right, guys. See y'all.